the numbers in mind. Try to simplify your x and y before getting the rest. Go back and study your test. And like Mr. Angry, what it's a piece of pie. Find x.
Hey math lovers, let's go over C15. Determine the zeros of each function or equation. Remember, how do I find those blue dots? You can use one of these 5 methods. We always try to go for factoring. So let's go ahead and see if we can get to this one, the factoring. I'm going to identify my A, B's, and C's. A is 9, B is 5, and C is 1. Now, you definitely want to make sure, there it is, that this is, it doesn't matter if that's f of x, y, g of x, but you definitely want no number over there, because over here in green on the right side, that is standard form. Let's see if we can do this one by factoring. So A times C is 9, and B is 5. Can you guys think of any 2 numbers in the whole wide world that will multiply to be 9? Give you a combination of those, and that will add to be 5. There are none, which means it's not factorable. All right, what does this mean for us? This does not mean we can't solve it by factoring. We're going to have to use something else. You can use completing the square, but completing the square is best when A is equal to 1 and your B is even. That is 1, that is the best. So we're going to try quadratic formula. Let's do it. I'll sing you the famous quadratic formula song. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, we're going to do a substitution. I'm going to use my highlighter here. So every a value here and here we're going to put in 9. Every b value we're going to be putting in 5. And every c value we're going to be putting in 1. Let's go ahead and put those in. X equals negative, remember substitutions here, and that would be a 5 plus or minus the square root of the b value, which was 5. We're going to square that, minus 4, or negative 4 times the a value, which is 9 times 1, all over 2 times the a value, which is 9. Okay, so let's go ahead now and simplify. To simplify, we just take the opposite of negative 5, sorry, opposite of positive 5, which is negative 5. 5 squared is 25. Now, if you're wondering what math operation to write over here, let me do this with you. Negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. Times 1 is still negative 36. And this would be all over 18. Whoa, got a bunch of straggling things over here. Okay, let's go ahead and simplify again. So negative 5 plus or minus 25 minus 36 is negative 11. And all over 18. Okay, so how do you simplify this? Okay, take you on a math journey over here. Because this is negative, for now we're just going to say that the answer, so let me just write the answer. Answer is no real solution. What does this mean? Let's highlight that in blue, because above, remember, we're trying to find those 2 blue dots right there, right? So what does that mean for our graph? Let's go back to the pencil. Okay, so basically what it means is that nothing is touching the x-axis here. Nothing's touching the x-axis. The graph's above the x-axis. What kind of tips can I get? I know it's still opening up because A is positive and C is 1. So you might have something like this. It's 1. And the graph might go something like this. Okay. Do you see how it's not touching the red line right there? No touching. Okay. What does this mean? They call these imaginary solutions. We have imaginary solutions. So you can just stop the video now. The blue box is the answer, but I want to show you that. And then I'm actually going to show you guys how to do this. So you need some kind of information that I equals the square root of -1. Okay, so I basically means imaginary. How do I apply that for that -11? So you would do something like this. You would have the square root of -1. Let's try that again. So I have the square root of -1 times square root of 11. Okay, and then we just apply this information that we just said. I equals the square root of -1. So that would be, we're doing a substitution here, is I. Square root of -1 is I. And you have this radical 11 still there. So the best answer, this is the Algebra 2 answer now that you guys are in this class, is x equals -5 plus or minus, our new answer, I radical 11 over 18. Now that answer seems crazy, but again, this kind of shows that there is no touching right there, okay? See ya. All right, let's go over C18. Determine the zeros and roots of each function of or equation. We're trying to find those blue dots, right? There's 5 methods. We could try to do this by factoring, and we're always going to try by F for factoring. Let's try to see if we can factor this, okay? A is 7, B is 9, and C is 5. Hopefully you've learned that the coefficients, the numbers in front, are your A, B's, and C's. Notice how in yellow there is no X's. Let's see if we can factor that, okay? A, C, and B. So A times C is 35. My B value is 9. We need to think of numbers here whose product or those two numbers multiply to be 35, but those same two numbers add to be 35. Now, students have said that this is more the difficult part of factoring. Well, take this number and just write out the factors, numbers that multiply to be 35. 35 times 1, 5, and 7. Any combination of those two, if you subtract them, will it equal 9? No, no. So you can't solve by factoring. Okay, so what does that mean? A lot of students say, well, that's my answer. Well, no. Use another method. Use another method, right? If you can't cook the potato by boiling, let's say you have no water, then you find something else to cook it with. So one that will always work is the quadratic formula. Let's do it. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Always write down the formula for every single problem. All right, here we go. A is 7. So every time I see an A, we're going to write 7 here and here. Every time I see a B, here and here, I'm going to write 9s. And every time I see a C, I'm going to write 5. All right, let's do our substitution. Let's replace what we see, okay? The B value was in green there. That is a 9. Plus or minus the square root. Your B value is 9 squared minus 4. A value is 7. And C value is 5. All over, make that fraction line super long. 2 times the A value, which is 7. Okay, what do we do next? We're going to simplify. Let's simplify. X equals negative 9 plus or minus. 9 squared is 81, not 18. And then negative 4 times 7 is negative 28. And negative 28, a negative times a positive is a negative. And 28 times 5 is 40. And 2 times 5 is 10 plus 4 gives me 140. Okay, so, and then all over 14. Let's keep simplifying. So now I have x equals negative 9 plus or minus. This will equal 19, negative 59 all over 14. Okay. I want to highlight this part. The fancy word is, this one is the discriminant. Come on now. Are we on the end of the page? That's what I wanted. Discriminant. When the discriminant is negative, less than 1, just basically means it's negative, then we have something called no real solutions. So we're talking about the discriminant. If the discriminant or number underneath the square root is positive, greater than 1, then you have real solutions. Okay, so right now we're working with real solutions, and I want to take it one step further. Is these non-real solutions just basically means that there are imaginary solutions. Let's get a graph and this will make sense. Here's my x, here's my y. And if I go up here, let's take up some of these numbers here. My c value is 5, so I know the graph is going to go somewhere like right there. And I have a positive a value, so I know my graph's going to go up. So my graph's going to look something like this. So this idea of no real solutions or imaginary solutions, I want you to notice that this does not touch the x-axis. Okay. Oops, I meant to do that as yellow. So if it, let's try to make this clear. If it touches, if this touches, then it has real solutions. If this part right here has no touch, then this would be the, let's draw an arrow here, the imaginary solutions or no real solutions. So big idea is, this is kind of like your Algebra 1 freshman answer. And now that you're integrated 3, or we call this like Algebra 2 old school, this is the better answer. Now the book has this for right now because you don't know any other information. But remember, if it's not touching the x-axis, then you have imaginary solutions. See you guys. I have solve x squared plus 10x plus 74 equals 0. Leslie, what's the first thing we're going to do? Write down the quadratic formula. What's the quadratic formula? Thank you. Delia, what should we do next? Go. Good. Frida. 196? Good, good. Okay. Echo?
Negative 10 plus or minus square root of negative 196.
Yes. Alright, so there I'm going to factor out the negative 1. In class, that becomes what? Okay, the I comes out because I is equal to the square root of negative 1. So you're going to have x equals negative 10 plus or minus I, and then the square root of 196 is what? So, come on, I would have written 14I. Hey, hey, hey. All over 2. Because the square root of 196 is 14, that's coming out. The square root of negative 1 is coming out, that's an I. And I just need to clean this up by factoring. Greatest common factor. So I see the 2 there, that's my hint. Negative 5 plus or minus 7I all over 2 times 1. Because remember, you can distribute. Let's distribute together, class. 2 times negative 5? Negative 10. 2 times 7I? 14I. 2's cancel. X equals negative 5 plus or minus 7I. Show me with your fingers. How many solutions is this? Show me. It's 2. If you don't see that, it's negative 5 plus 7I and negative 5 minus 7I. You don't need to split them. This is probably simpler, but I just want you to make sure you understand that. Here's our solution. So pay attention to the discriminant, that number inside the radical. It's okay if it's a negative number. Back in Algebra 1, maybe in Algebra 2 that was not okay, and now in pre-calculus we know that. You can use imaginary numbers.
I love math. You don't love math? What's wrong with you? I love math.
Now, let's see if you really get it, okay? Solving quadratics, there's multiple ways, just like cooking a potato, right? Think in your head the most efficient method. If you're thinking in your head, I don't know any methods, bad. On the count of 3, we're going to say the fastest one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're about to do the quadratic formula. I think square root method would be the fastest. Subtract 20, divide by 4, take the square root. The answer is x equals plus or minus something. Thank you. Jesus, substitution.
0 plus or minus radical 0 minus 4 times 4 times 20 all over 2 times 4.
A is 4, C is 20. All over 2 times what? 4. Thank you. Carolina. Go. Uh-huh. Negative 4 times 4, that's 20. Over. Raise your hand if you have that on your paper so far. Alright. I'm just going to write a factor of negative 1. like another square root, right? 320 over 8. So class, this one becomes, what did Pirate say? I. 0 plus or minus I. So if you didn't know that, right on the side, imaginary numbers. Imaginary numbers is they use I equals the square root of -1. Write that down. Raise your hand if you knew that before I gave you the tip. Thank you for paying attention in Math 5. So the square root of 320, what'd you guys get? Break it down for me. 16 times 20, does that work? And then that is 4 and 4. This one's going to be 4 and 5, yes? Then you have 4 and 4, that breaks down to 2, 2, and 5. If you multiply those, 16 times 2 is 32, 64, 64 times 5 gives you 320, right? And then we're just looking for pairs. Pair comes out. Pair comes out. 4 times 2 is 8 radical 5. Raise your hand if you got that. Did I get it wrong? Let's check. This is, you can write it in front or, we'll write here. 8 radical 5. Let's check my answer really quick. This is 8. If they go back inside the house, there's how many of them? 2. 5 times 8 times 8. Class, what is 5 times 8? And 40 times 8 is 320, which is the number we just had. Okay? Alright, all of this is divided by 8. Class, do I need to write the 0? Nope, so I have x equals plus or minus 8 radical 5. Pay attention, the I is not inside the radical over 8. Well, think about it. This is kind of like 8x over 8. Does that make sense? How would you guys simplify this? You can cross those out. Does that make sense? So this is x equals plus or minus radical 5i. And that's our answer. You can also write it in a different way too. X equals plus or minus I radical 5. As long as the I is not inside the radical, I think I like this one better. So the moral of the story, you can solve the quadratic equation here by using quadratic formula, but I think the most efficient method would have been using the square root method. Alright, so it tells me to solve a quadratic equation here. It's to the power of 2. It's in standard form, set equal to 0. Let's try the easiest method. You know, what do you think is the easiest method to solve? She says a quadratic formula. I'm going to take a shot at factoring. Did anyone try factoring? Let's try factoring. Unit, what's our A value? 15. Or A times C, that would be 15. So A, B, C, A, B, C. Your B value? 4. Unit, are there two numbers that multiply to be 15 but add to be 4? Yeah, quick strategy is numbers get larger. 15 times 1, 5 times 3, and none of those values will add to be a 4. So this would be a prime factor. You can't factor this, and this would be your answer. So she says, let's try the quadratic formula. Natalie, can you tell me the quadratic formula, please? I'm going to highlight these negative signs because they had some issues with students on your quizzes that I finished grading over the weekend. Thank you, Natalie. Melina, go ahead and do the substitution for us. So always write down the formula. I let you guys have formula sheets, right? Let's go ahead and simplify this. Samantha? How much did that one come out to be? Positive or negative? So negative 60, right? Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times 5 is negative 60. All over what? 6. Raise your hand if you have that so far. Good. Let's keep advancing. Tatiana?
X equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of negative 44.
Negative what?
44.
Over 6. Okay, here I'm going to make negative 44 into factors. So I have negative 1 times radical 4 times radical 11. Or you can actually put that all in the same. 6. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus. Class, the square root of negative 1 is I. The square root of 4? Square root 11 can't break down. And then you have the 6. So, red alert, when you see that negative discriminant, the discriminant is just a number inside the radical. If it's a negative, then you know we'll graph it real quick when we're done. So here I'm going to factor out a 2. X equals 2 times negative 2 plus or minus I radical 11 all over 2 times 3. And the reason why I did that is so I can cancel my 2's. My answer is x equals negative 2 plus or minus I radical 11. Some people put the I behind the radical. Just make sure that the I is not inside the radical over 3. And this would be our answer. Remember, you have 2 solutions there. Negative 2 plus I radical 11 over 3 and negative 2 minus I radical 11 over 3. We could have also tried to solve this by the completing the square. I would not recommend it, just because your A value is not 1 and this is nice, your B value is even. But
yesterday you said tomorrow. Alright, let's go ahead and solve this quadratic equation here. 7r squared minus 8r equals negative 10. Don't get intimidated by those variables there, r. But notice how that constant is on the other side. So we're going to add 10 here. So I get 7r squared minus 8r plus 10 equals 0. So the c value is not negative 10. It is a positive 10. Alright, next thing we're going to do here is we're going to identify our a, b's, and c's. Here I wrote down the standard form. And now I have the quadratic formula. Always write it down. So our b value is negative 8. always use a parentheses for substitution. That minus sign must be there outside of the b, plus or minus -8 parentheses squared minus 4 times the a value, which is 7, and a c value that is 10, all over 2 times the a value, which is 7. So I set it equal to 0, standard form, identify a, b, and c, got the quadratic formula, substitute it, now we're just going to simplify. Opposite of -8 is +8. -8 squared is 64. -4 times 7 times 10 is going to be -280, all over 14. Eight plus or minus 64 minus 280. It's going to be -216 divided by 14. Feel free to use your calculator. Eight plus or minus let's do a little side problem here. Don't need a calculator. 216 times 1. We're trying to look for two identical numbers. 2 times 108. About 6 times 36. That sounds like a good one, because it has a large perfect square here. So -1 times 36 times 6 over 14. Remember, what do pirates say? Pirates say aye. 8 plus or minus square root of -1 equals I. Square root of 36. 6, they come outside the house. The 6 is still in there, and you're left with 14. Now you'll probably notice that all of the numbers on the outside of the radical are even. So let's factor out a 2. 8, 2 times 4 plus or minus 3i radical 6 over 2 times 7. Or you can always distribute that 2 to check your answer. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So now we're left with 4 plus or minus 3i radical 6 all over 7. Remember, that's actually 2 solutions, so here I wrote 1 plus, 1 minus. Again, I'm trying to show you that there are 2 solutions. So I've basically split the plus or minus, and this we call an exact answer. It's exact because we don't have to round. If you wanted to split this, you could. 4/7 plus 3i radical 6 over 7, and 4/7 minus 3i radical 6 over 7. The reason why I split them is now you have a real and you have a complex solution. So if you want to put this in decimals, you could. I think the exact one is probably the best. So 4/7 rounds to about 0.57. And now I'm going to put in 3 radical 6, press the right key, go out of the radical, close parentheses, divided by 7. And this will give you 1.05. Basically, it's the same thing on the other side, 1.05. Remember, you cannot combine the two. 0.57 plus 1.05i, they are not like terms. Why? Because it has like an I in there. This is a decimal answer.